Dude goes to doctor, says he's depressed, says life seems harsh and cruel, says he feels all alone in a threatening world where what lies ahead is vague and uncertain. Doctor says, treatment is simple. YouTuber ThoughtSlime made video today. Go and watch. That should pick you up. Dude bursts into tears, says, but doctor, I am ThoughtSlime. Good joke. Everybody like and subscribe. Roll on snare drum. Hello, it's me, the Jokler. Want to know how I got these scars? Guess what? It was from a knife. Just kidding, it's me, ThoughtSlime. And today, I'm going to talk about jokes. And I'm off to a great start because I'm being really funny already. Jokes! I love them, you love them. Boy, it's fun to josh around with pals. Laughter is probably the best feeling in the world. The only pleasure life can give you that doesn't require any sort of sacrifice. You can't enjoy food without being hungry. You can't enjoy sex without being thirsty. You can't enjoy exercise, personal development, or even child rearing without putting the work in. But laughter is just pure joy, for free. And a good laugh can really do wonders for you. It can turn around a bad day, it can make a bad situation bearable, it can even bring you together with people. I owe pretty much all of my close friendships, every relationship I've ever had, and most of my professional career to my sense of humor. Now, my jokes certainly aren't to everyone's tastes, but they've given me a great deal of blessings in my life. And if you don't think I'm funny, oh, you think it's so easy? Why don't you get a... I used to do stand-up comedy for a living. Well, not for a living, I never made a living, but I did it for money. I did this for many years. It used to be my sole creative outlet. And there's a certain attitude among stand-up comedians that I always kind of disliked. They talked about the importance of what they do, what a responsibility they felt. Personally, I find that a little pompous. I think a comedian's job is to make people laugh. I think laughter is enough. I think it actually diminishes the importance of comedy to suggest that it must always do something else. It must always seek to educate or agitate. Comedy does not require justification. It's worthwhile on its own terms. Some people, though, couldn't handle the idea that their work was frivolous. It needed to be something more. They needed to feel like they had an impact. Some people felt strongly that comedy was something sacred, a way to exorcise bad thoughts or contextualize the darkness at the heart of humanity in a way that robbed it of its power. So they viewed any attempts at censorship as interference with this holy mission. Their job, their duty, was to portray the warts and wrinkles of humanity with as much honesty as they could muster. Predictably, this led to people being competitively dark, to reveal harsher and crueler truths. And for those things to be true, they needed to live that experience. They needed to become toxic, to revel in their toxicity, so that they could excoriate that toxicity on stage, show everyone how brave they were. I was doing a show out of town once, with two other comics. For those that don't go to a lot of comedy shows, they're usually structured into 3 acts. An MC who works the crowd, gets them excited, and then introduces the other 2 acts. The middle, who is usually the less skilled or less experienced act that does about 15 to 20 minutes of material. And the headliner, whose name is on the ticket, who usually does about 40 to an hour. Now, I was almost always the middle act. I never really graduated from that. I occasionally MC'd, but I wasn't good at it, and usually it was only when they couldn't find someone else to fill that spot in time. So it was me or nobody. Since we were out of town, the company that I worked for had set us up in a hotel room. And the hotel room that they had set up in this city was this enormous apartment at the top of a hotel that all 3 acts typically shared. Now, the MC that weekend was local, so he wasn't staying with us. So we were doing 3 or 4 shows that weekend, and on one of them, the headliner had his buddy come on to do a guest spot, which is fairly common. That night, though, the buddy and the headliner both bombed miserably, while both I and the MC did fine. Not amazing, but fine. I don't particularly remember the guest spot's act. It didn't seem terrible to me, as I recall. But I remember the headliner's act, and I remember the exact moment the crowd turned against him. And content warning, because some pretty horrific ableism is about to start. Now, I don't remember the exact bit he did, and I wouldn't tell another comic's bit online anyway, even though it's a disgusting bit that I hate. The basic idea was that he was pitching ideas to make the Special Olympics more exciting. Now, me even saying that, you can feel something bad is coming. And I think a truly skilled comedian could do something very interesting with that tension. That dreadful feeling that someone is about to say something terrible, and what's more, they're gonna make you complicit in whatever they say, and you might even laugh at it. The punchline was that for the high dive event, they could probably get a better dive out of the athlete by tying their teddy bear to a cinder block and dropping it in the pool. Funny stuff. The audience was silent for the rest of his set. And that's the worst and most humiliating thing a comedian can experience. At least if you get a hostile crowd, you can fight back. If people boo you, you're at least getting a reaction, but a completely indifferent crowd, you might as well not be there. That night, the three of us, the headline act, the guest spot, and me, were in the apartment smoking a joint. The headline act says, "Well, that crowd was terrible. They hated being made to think." He says to me, "No offense, but what you and the MC do, anyone can do that. Anyone can make people laugh." See, I want to make people think. I want to challenge people. That crowd tonight, they weren't ready for that. In his mind, the fact that he bombed made him the better comic. The fact that the MC and I did not bomb, that made us inferior, lesser comics, because we played it safe. So I asked him, "Well, with your Special Olympics joke, what were you trying to make people think about?" What I left unsaid was that I actually thought it was a very tasteless joke. One that if anyone were to actually think about, it would be completely inert, unfunny, genuinely horrific. But he had thought about it. He said to me that he felt like nobody should pity anyone, that pity was a dismissive and thoughtless response to people who were different, and people who faced different challenges in life. He himself had struggled with profound medical issues, and felt strongly that the pity he received was condescending, unhelpful, and made him feel like a smaller person. So, by making fun of the Special Olympics, and by extension, the mentally and/or physically disabled people that compete in the Special Olympics, he was respecting them in some way. He was showing that he didn't pity them, and encouraging the audience not to pity them either. It struck me then, as it does now, that this was a post hoc rationalization for a mean-spirited joke. But even so, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I said, "Well, I've never pitied anyone in the Special Olympics. I've always found them very inspiring. I don't think it's respectful to insult them, and the idea that the audience needs to be taught not to pity them doesn't really make sense to me either, because I don't think people really do pity athletes in the Special Olympics." And he said to me, "Ugh, it's just a joke." The conversation ended after that. He judged me as an oversensitive SJW who couldn't be made to meet people on their level, and I judged him to be an insensitive prick. Looking back, I'm kind of astonished by that response. It's just a joke. I mean, his whole argument was that he wanted to make people think, that it wasn't just a joke. It was meant to communicate a sincere message. The moment I asked whether that message was true, or if it was true, if it was worth stating, he instantly shut down and told me it was just a joke, not to be thought about or analyzed. Now, my point here isn't to put this dude on blast. My act wasn't exactly woke at the time either, and this was years ago. I have no idea whether he still tells that joke, or whether he still feels that way. Also, he had a really shitty show that night, so it's possible he was just pissed off. Didn't really mean anything he was saying. No, the point is to retroactively win an argument by presenting it to my audience that I have carefully cultivated to agree with my position, and telling the story in a way that flatters me and makes me look like the reasonable person debating a prejudiced jerk. Wait, fuck, no it wasn't. I mean, the real reason is that it's a very clear example of the type of cognitive dissonance I see online a lot. That jokes can make important political statements, but can't be criticized for making a statement by virtue of the fact that they are jokes. Joking is a legitimate means of expressing oneself and speaking truth to power, and thus must be respected and protected at all costs. But, also, it's meaningless silliness, so you can't ever analyze those messages that are definitely important and must be protected. I make all sorts of jokes here on my highly political YouTube channel, and most of the time I'm trying to communicate my sincere political beliefs through those jokes. I actually think it's kind of cowardly to retreat from criticism of one's political position because it was stated in the middle of a joke. Now don't get me wrong, you can facetiously make a point that you disagree with for comic effect, and I think it would be ridiculous to criticize someone for that. However, even in doing that, one reveals a certain position, a set of assumptions and beliefs that are genuine and not above criticism. I'll give you an example of what I mean. Here's a joke that I could see myself tweeting. I don't care if you always agree with what the cops do, You should always drink their piss if they ask. Now, obviously, I don't believe that. It's clearly a joke. I actually think it's a very bad idea to drink cop piss. But it says something about what I actually believe. Namely, that people who support and apologize for the police are pathetic and will go to absurd lengths to comply with even the most unjust demands or impositions. If you were to criticize me for saying that I think people should drink cops' piss, you'd be missing the point. You'd be criticizing a joke. I don't believe that, obviously. But if you were to criticize me for trying to make people less sympathetic to the police, that would be appropriate criticism because that's exactly what I'm trying to do with the joke. Also, you'd be wrong. Fuck you, piss drinker. Now say you were to criticize me for trying to make people less sympathetic to the police, and I were to say, hey, it's just a joke, it's a goof and a gaff, you can't criticize an idea that was said in a funny way. I mean, it's a joke, but it's very clearly not just a joke. What's happening to me? My eyes! Welcome to the Eyeball Zone, where I give away eyeballs for free. Today I want to talk about a YouTube channel called BadEmpanada, but don't let the name fool you. He's not bad or an empanada. He's a human and good. He's an Argentinian history grad who covers a broad range of political, historical, and sociological topics in an informative and well-researched way that's still completely approachable. Check out his video on Peronism, an ideology I had never heard of before he sent me this video, linked in the description. Hey, do you want eyeballs? Warm, delicious eyeballs? Email me at thoughtslimeeditor@gmail.com and you just might find yourself trapped here in the eyeball zone. A joke can't exist in a vacuum. It relies on shared cultural knowledge, a mutual experience. The more you can relate to people, the more you can get them to relate with you, the funnier you'll be as a person, as a general rule. Ask yourself, what people understand you the most, and what people do you laugh with the most? I'd bet that there's a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram. Very seldomly, when people complain about a joke, are they complaining about the exaggeration or the punchline of the joke. They're complaining about the assumptions that the joke is based on. They're saying that the assumptions that make this joke funny to you are hurtful to me. And while the joke maker may not believe what they're saying literally, they might still genuinely make the assumptions that are actually being criticized. And to respond to that with, it's just a joke, it's an exaggeration, I don't mean what I'm saying, misses the point of that criticism. It's a deflection. I'll give you an example of what I mean. People make a lot of jokes about Trump and Putin being in love with each other. Now clearly, nobody genuinely believes that Trump and Putin are gay lovers. They're using it as an insult, a way to demean both men. It's an exaggeration of the perceived domination that Putin holds over Trump from his alleged political influence. And that's, like, super homophobic, because it's implying that there's something diminishing about being gay, that being gay is something to be mocked. Now you might say that both men are homophobes, so calling them gay is a way to pick at their insecurities. But firstly, neither of these men are going to read your very witty tweet or see your political cartoon, so I find that justification lacking. Secondly, the mutual understanding you are attempting to cultivate, the assumption that the joke rests on, is that being gay is somehow farcical, something to be mocked or scorned, something embarrassing and beneath powerful men. Now, there are degrees of this, of course. Some jokes might catch people in the crossfire in a way that's wildly unpredictable, or not really insulting enough to be a problem. I make a lot of jokes about how sweaty I get in the summer, and that does imply that there's something wrong with being sweaty. And is that fair to people with glandular disorders that make them sweaty all the time? At the end of the day, there's a certain amount of personal discretion that has to be taken into account. And that can be a problem because it means that what is and what is not an acceptable joke is, to some degree, open to personal interpretation. And that leaves wiggle room for bad actors to argue that their jokes aren't harmful enough to warrant criticism. One of the common things that people cite is the idea of punching up versus punching down. To punch up is to make fun of someone more powerful than you, someone of higher status. To punch down is to do the opposite, to make fun of someone with less status than you. Now, I think this one really only applies to jokes with negative elements. You don't really have to clear most knock-knock jokes by this standard. It's just a handy way to tell whether or not you're abusing privilege to tell a joke that people might be uncomfortable with, but might be unable to tell you why. Maybe they're expected to play along, or if they did speak up, people would just dismiss their criticism as being too sensitive. If I made a racist joke on YouTube, most people would rightly call that out as unacceptable. And when I say most people, I mean most people in my audience, not YouTube writ large. They'd be cool with it, they like racist jokes, but you get my point. Now, if I made a racist joke privately in a group of my white friends and one person of color, there's a powerful social disincentive on that person of color to speak up and say they don't like the joke. They're risking alienating themselves, making me defensive, and who knows whether or not the other people present will even understand their complaint, let alone agree with them. And I might then come to think the joke isn't offensive, because hey, Dave laughed. Now, I personally would not consciously make a prejudice joke. However, I might unconsciously make a prejudice joke. I did, quite recently, in fact. I made a lazy joke about the Irish spelling of the name Owen, and I didn't know it was the Irish spelling, so my intent certainly wasn't to make fun of Irish people, but I still contributed to prejudice against the Irish and demeaned the language that they've been fighting for generations to protect. My intent is irrelevant. I didn't mean to do harm, but I did harm. And I never would have known I did harm if people who were hurt by the joke had not spoken up and held me accountable for it. And the result of that is I've learned a lesson, and I'll never again make fun of a foreign-sounding name and assume it's fine because the person I'm making fun of is white. That's why it's important that we can create a culture where people feel as though they can speak up when jokes insult them, because people won't always know when they're making an insulting joke. They won't always know when they're making a joke that contributes to a larger pattern of prejudice. They won't know when they're normalizing prejudice and making things worse for people who are already struggling. A lot of comedians are very concerned about censorship. They don't want their jokes censored. They need to be able to make fun of anything. And I agree with that. I think people should be able to make fun of anyone or anything. Whether or not it's a good idea to make fun of everything is another matter entirely. Despite their revulsion towards censorship, comedians often contribute to a different kind of censorship. Their jokes must never be silenced. That's a slippery slope towards authoritarianism. But criticism of their jokes, however, can and should be silenced. These oversensitive snowflakes are just afraid to be challenged. They need to suck it up. But I don't think you get to have it both ways. If you're going to ask people to be less sensitive and take a joke, maybe you need to be a little less sensitive and accept criticisms of that joke. Humor is subjective. Everybody laughs at different things. The only way to tell whether or not you're successful, the only way to know whether or not you're funny, is by whether or not people laugh at and enjoy your jokes. There are no extenuating circumstances that make a joke funny if people aren't laughing. And if your goal isn't to get easy laughs, but to challenge people and make them think, you have to be brave enough to do that too. So if people are pissed off at your joke, it might be a joke, but it's not just a joke. Knock knock, who's there? It's me, ThoughtSlime. Hello, and thank you for watching another one of my videos. Please press the like button and also the subscribe button, unless you've already clicked the subscribe button, in which case doing so would unsubscribe you, so please don't do that. I want you to subscribe, not to unsubscribe. I hope that's clear. Also, you can jingle jangle that little bell and that'll tell you when I upload new videos, and also it'll tell you when I'm live streaming, which I do every Thursday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Take a look over at my Patreon at patreon.com/thoughtslime. You can see a bunch of names and cartoons. Those are all people that gave me money for this stuff. Also, there's a Ko-fi link in the description for one-time donations if that's more your bag, baby. For the record, every joke I don't like is racist, and everyone's a Nazi, and I'm the only cool person in the world, and we should censor everybody. It's always good to do a censorship on people. So I'm gonna censor everyone. That's my genuine opinion. Take it away.